Hello, hello, and welcome to Female Founderhood Podcast. This is literally the way you can eavesdrop to two female founders having a chat, shit, and giggles. Yes, we do swear. Close your ears. if this is not for the faint hearted, definitely. So today I am going to chat with the Denise Conroy. Her title is Queenmaker. I know what she means, but she herself is a king, and we're gonna discuss all about that in the conversation. And hello, Denise in New Hampshire.
Hello. Yes, New Hampshire. It's gorgeous here today.
Oh, and it's gorgeous here too in the Old Hampshire. So
New Hampshire.
yeah, exactly. So speaking of king and queen, we touch a little bit about well, to give listeners a bit of a background, how I found Denise is that she spoke truth to power, as one does or should. And it blew my mind because I'm a woman of color from Indonesia, which was colonized by the Dutch for 3.5 centuries, and then followed by Japanese colonization for 3.5 years, but what felt like also centuries. Um, and we literally got our independence because of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, hashtag Oppenheimer. So the atrocious, basically people would call it a war crime, right? But here's the funny thing about history. When you look at it from a different, not even perspective, different truth, different experience, that atomic bombing allowed us, the colony, no, yeah, colony, to actually sneak. Really, the story of our independence proclamation was we sneaked and like, okay, guys, we're gonna go independent. The Japanese are panicking, and then 17th of August, we just celebrated it a couple of weeks ago, and was like, okay, we are Indonesia and we're independent, yay! But that is, of course, there's two sides of the coin of the atomic bombing. But what caught my attention is Denise is the one, probably the first white woman who is not afraid and very, very vocal of talking to fellow female, white female, and say, oi, we have a lot of blind spots. Oi, we actually get some privilege from our whiteness too. So tell me, Denise, how was your journey? I hate to say wokeness, but how's your journey in being aware that, because again, checking your privilege is not something that's natural for people, right?
No, not at all. And here's the thing, like we're all racist. So if you're and it's wild. I mean, we're all in this very white, system. And so even folks who aren't white hold on to these racist ideals because they've been shoved down all of our throats, right? And I think it becomes incumbent upon us, the folks who have benefited the most, white people, certainly white women, to start to interrogate, why are we perched in this powerful position and have always been, right? And what are the things we can do to start to dismantle that, unwind it? For me, it was, like a lot of people in America, it was George Floyd. You're like, hold up a second. When a man can be literally smothered to death with somebody's foot, like somebody literally had their knee on his neck, and
Public.
choked the life out of him, and that's in public while people watched. And let's be fair, that was happening well before George Floyd. That's
Oh,
happened
yeah.
numerous
Oh, yeah, yeah,
times.
yeah.
That was not it was the first publicized time.
Yes.
I think where it pierced
Supported
our
and publicized,
consciousness.
yes.
Yes. And I think that, we have a choice to pay attention to those things. And oftentimes people like me, and I do, we've chosen not to pay attention. We choose to play ignorant. It's when you talk to someone and they're like, well, I don't see color. I'm colorblind. That's a choice to be ignorant and not talk about all the stuff that is prevalent in our culture.
It's I get offended more when people say I'm colorblind versus when they ask where I'm from.
Yeah,
Because if you say you're colorblind, are you also gender blind? Or are you disability blind? And therefore therefore you just choose to ignore people's identity, and therefore you don't have to accommodate anything. Right? I think
exactly.
it's just being
You're
irresponsible.
completely
Mm.
you wash your hands of any ability. And here's the thing, when we say we want people to be anti-racist, I'm not looking to make you guilty. I'm not. Like people are
Mm.
like, I don't want to feel guilty for what my ancestors did, but it's not just about your ancestors, number one. It's about how you've benefited from that behavior. The second thing is, though, I will tell you, the goal is not to make white people guilty. However, when you do this work, and invariably you just start reading more and more about the history
Mm.
of America and the history of, race in this country, you can't help but feel guilty. I'm sorry to tell you this, but once you start really getting into it, you're like, oh God, like you just can't help it because you can't go back either. And I think most people know that, and that's why they don't want to do the work. You cannot go back to being ignorant. Once you know a thing, you know the thing,
Yeah.
right?
You didn't know what you didn't know. Once you know, you can't
Right.
unknow it.
No, I guess some people can pretend like they don't know it, but for me, it's been quite the opposite. I want to know more and more. I get very curious, and you brought up a really good point, which is our identities are really, really important. Like I'm just starting to understand, I'm a very plain, boring white person, right? But I have a background too, right?
Mm. Mm.
And when I start to look into who my people were, that's a big part of my identity. They were Irish. From what
Yeah,
I'm learning, they were always under somebody's boot. They were always seeking to be free in one way or another because of the British colonizing
of course.
Ireland. And so, and that's a part of me. I would be lying if I said that didn't influence my family. And I'm starting
Mm.
to connect those dots as I just see how we behave. What are the things that trigger us, right? Anytime somebody tries
Yeah.
to restrict us, we get really triggered and I can see it.
Mm. And here's a different perspective. If you ignore race, you're also ignoring biology and therefore science,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
That's why, I
Yeah.
mean, if you claim to be colorblind, you're being an idiot, basically. And
You are.
right? And you're saying
Yeah.
you're proud that you're, I mean, that, and secondly, you're offending people who actually have color blindness, first of all.
Exactly. Like, let's not even, you shouldn't even use that term, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're just ignorant, or you've refused to check your privilege. Now, what, on a day-to-day basis, Denise, what special, white women privilege that you now, like, would stop and think, oh, damn, I guess if I weren't white, I wouldn't have this.
Yeah. So it's wild. Once I started doing this work and becoming aware of all my privilege,
Hmm.
it just makes you interrogate yourself more. So the most recent story, and this happens at least once a week, if not more. Most
Hmm.
recent story is I live in New Hampshire. It's a very white state, super white.
And
It's
super
so white,
conservative.
it's weird, honestly. It's purple. It's right in the middle.
Okay.
We're very into independent. I think we have more registered independents than either party, right?
Okay,
So,
interesting.
but it's very white. You rarely see a black person, which I came from Atlanta. I lived in Atlanta for 8 years. So that's weird for me. Like I'm used to seeing black people all the
Yeah.
time. And then you move here and you're like, where are the black people? This is weird. So we move here. My
Mhm.
husband's a vapor. He vapes. So I go to the
Mhm.
vape store the other day and, the people that own it are white. Everybody who frequents it are white. The day we happened to go, a group of young men, teenagers,
Mm-hmm.
Black teenagers. They pull up in a Mercedes, right? And lo and behold, my first thought, my husband's in getting his vape, whatever vape people get. And I'm like, I'm a little bit scared and I'm a little bit instantly, I feel myself tense up. I feel myself, what are they doing here? And I recognized it. The only difference between me now versus years ago before I started doing the work, I never recognized it. I just thought it was normal. So it's funny. My husband comes and gets in the car and he goes, "What's this whole situation?" And I go, "Right?" I said, "How racist are we being right now?" And he goes, "I know, I asked myself the same thing." So we're sitting there having at least a normal conversation about why is it that a group of four, young Black guys, teenagers,
Mm-hmm.
makes us nervous. And I think a lot of it has to be we are so used to everything being white focused, right? White centric,
Mm-hmm.
right? When something, which of these things is not like the other? It's like Sesame Street back in the day. You're like, oh my gosh, why are they here? Are they going to do something bad? It's like, no, they're a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of goofy ass teenagers, right? They're not
Yeah.
going to do anything bad. So I
Mm-hmm.
think until we as Americans, white Americans,
Mm-hmm.
start having these conversations together and internally, I don't know how things change. So the upshot was we sat there and talked about it. And I'm like, those are a bunch of goofy high school kids literally out riding around, probably in their parents' car. And we've all done it. So what's the big deal, right? That's where
Yeah.
we landed.
It's crazy when my experience. I'm born and raised in Indonesia, and the first time I checked my privilege was when I realized when I moved to Bali, actually. So I was born in Jakarta,
Mhm.
the capital, and when I moved
Okay.
to Bali,
Mm-hmm.
and every Dick, Tom, and Harry now is in Bali. But at the time,
For
it
good
wasn't.
reason.
Yeah, for good reason. But at the time, it wasn't as big of a white people community there. But I recognized my privilege, like, damn. So we had blackouts in Bali, and the reason was because the electricity power source was in the next island, which is Java. And I'm like, damn, this is Bali. This is an international island, international destination, and we don't even have our own electricity power source. And it made me, even without having different races, being in the same country, I realized that you can so much, you can be aware if you want to. And I felt like, because for the longest time before I moved to Bali, for the longest time I felt bad about myself, because as I watch Hollywood TV every day, I always say, damn, I was born in the wrong country. I thought, if only I was born in New York. If only I was born in LA, that sort of thing. And then, but then I told myself, Rebecca, you're lucky you're born in the capital. Imagine if you were born in the middle of a jungle in Borneo, which could have been. Um, so, and then I realized that, and now I'm like, okay, wherever you are placed, that is where you should bloom. That's it. That's the zip code privilege. But then I moved to
Mm-hmm.
England 3 years ago. I'm married to a Brit, a white Brit. And when I got here in the Old Hampshire, which is a red county, very, very white, I noticed that it's so crazy that even the whites are being classist. So it's not race, it's class.
Yeah.
So it's so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm like, first of all, I had never seen a white homeless person in my life before. Can you imagine
Right.
the
Amazing.
cognitive dissonance in my head?
What? Yeah.
Exactly. Like, because the imagery that we have, like homeless, hungry people, are just the blacks, right? the kid in
Exactly.
Africa.
It's everyone who looks like me. Yeah, somebody in Africa,
Yeah,
thousands and thousands of miles away. Yeah. Isn't it
exactly.
crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
We
like,
have all these you have all these stereotypes in your head, and unless you're really active about busting them,
mm,
they'll stay there, right? You'll live that way.
yeah. And it didn't connect in my head. Like, there's something wrong in this picture. I'm at a mall, and in front of the sandwich shop, there's a white, able bodied man sitting on the floor begging for pennies. Like,
Yep.
what is wrong with this picture? Whereas in my country, all the white men are expats with, chauffeur and, apartment, everything done for them, and so on. So when I got here, I was like, it's, I really, really had a culture shock, but inside my head. And it gave me another perspective that I think, as you rightly point out, Denise, if you don't do the work yourself, you will never know what you don't know. You don't know what your blind spots are. Like, for example, I just learned, because in Indonesia, we don't have any like an N word type.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we would call white people, just the white people, but no derogatory term. So there's
Yeah.
no slang per se in a bad way. Um, so um, in Indonesia, when we address or when we are describing a black person, we do use the N word with
Really?
absolutely, yeah, with absolutely no context, no no prejudice, no nothing. It's just a descriptive word like black,
Right.
like synonym of black. Crazy, right?
That'd be tough to that'd be crazy to get used to. Yes. Yes.
But then, but because
That would
there's
be yeah.
yeah, but because there's nothing in our mind, it's just almost like
Right.
a naive thing. And if you were a Black American and you would hear in the street, and you wouldn't even know how to react, because this is like brown people and brown people
Right.
having no idea what it meant. Um, so when I moved here, there is another word. It's a P word that describe all of apparently just dump um, all of South Asian races into this P word. I didn't know. I thought the P word was just an abbreviation of Pakistani.
Yeah, I was gonna say I know the P word. I used to work for a British company, so yeah.
But I didn't
Yeah.
know that. So, because Indonesia is a
Wow.
long word, like Pakistan is a
Yeah.
long word, and we call
Yeah.
ourselves and other people call us Indos, which is just short for Indonesians. So all of
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
things is to say that um, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to make mistakes, and at the same time, when you see other people making that mistake, what would your advice be to point it out to them, and say, but without the judgy, the, oh, you're offending blah blah blah. What would your advice be, Denise? Because we're now a
Well,
global society, like
yeah.
everyone is everywhere now, right?
I think it depends on the person. So you have to have context to know, is this a person that is, in a place where they're trying to be anti-racist, right? And if you
Mm,
know that, it's a lot easier because you can say to somebody, "Ooh, you might want to rethink that," right?
mm,
And that person who's already doing that work isn't going to get as offended,
mm,
uncomfortable. They'll still be uncomfortable, don't get me wrong,
mm,
but they'll take it in stride and they'll take it on and they'll self-interrogate. When you're doing it with somebody, let's say at work, and you don't know if they've done any anti-racist work, right? You can
Mm,
pretty much bet at most companies they probably haven't.
mm,
What I like to do is, unless it's really, really, really egregious in a group setting, I don't like to embarrass somebody in a group setting. Now, if it's super egregious and very honest, I will embarrass them in a group setting if they've
mm,
done something racist.
mm,
But that said, if it's something that's a little more nuanced, I will wait until everybody's left and I will say to the person, hey, you said this, and I just want you to self interrogate a little bit. And what I always say to people is
mm.
sleep on this for 2 sleeps. I like the 2 sleep rule for everything, pretty
Okay.
much. So I'm like, 2 sleeps, then I want you to come back to me and let's talk about it. Right. And I want to know where you land after 2 sleeps, because the problem is, it's like when we fuck up, when we
Mm,
say something racist,
mm,
right? And that is
mhm.
a fuck up, we have to, and somebody calls us out, you got to go through a lot of stages to take that on and start to self interrogate.
Yeah.
First, you get embarrassed, then
Yeah.
you feel shame, right? And you
Defensive.
got to go through all that. Yeah, you get defensive. So you really got to kind of cogitate on it a bit. So
Mhm,
then you can come back around to reasonable thinking, right? To
mm,
that get that front of your brain, that
mm,
cortex involved. And then you have the opportunity to be like, you know what? You're probably right. Right.
mm,
And then we can have a discussion and dialogue. Something I want to bring up, and you very eloquently put this together. You set me up for this. They always say history is written by winners, right? So if you think about all the different
yes.
colonizing and then done these things in all around the world,
Yeah.
don't forget that language is a function of history, and it's also written by winners. So when you talked about that P word, the N word, right? All
Yeah.
these words that have
Mm.
cropped up that otherwise, to your point, would just be a shortened name for a
Yeah.
country, someone who
Yeah.
comes from a country. It has that negative connotation because the winners, unfortunately, gave it that negative connotation. So language for me is something, when you start to look at English,
Mhm,
specifically American English,
mhm.
so many of the phrases we use are actually horrible. Like the one that blew my mind recently, and I had to get educated on it, was cakewalk. I used that phrase so much until a
What
couple
does that
years
mean,
ago.
though?
A
I've never
cakewalk is a
heard
term.
it. I mean, I never heard it in a
So
context.
So it's, if I would say, looking forward to this presentation today, and someone would be like, "Are you nervous?" And I'd be like, "Nah, this is cakewalk. It's easy,
Ah,
right?"
okay.
Cakewalk is as a phrase is meant to say something is easy breezy.
Okay.
Here's what a cakewalk actually was, though, and this is why I don't use this phrase anymore.
Okay.
Back in the days of slavery in the United States,
Mm,
slaves would be forced to put on a show. It would often happen on a Sunday,
mhm.
and it was a sort of like a minstrel show oftentimes, and they would have to sing and dance and embarrass and degrade themselves, and the prize they would win was a cake. Whoever did the best job of making a fool of themselves for these white people watching was a cake. And once you know what that is, you're like, I will never say that phrase again.
Oh,
Right?
oh my
It just
god!
literally, it gives me like the heebie jeebies now. So
Yeah,
and
me
there's so
too.
many phrases
Oh my god!
horrible.
Is this what,
Yeah.
by the
So it's
way,
it's interesting. It's not
yeah,
easy.
yeah.
There was nothing easy about that. I'm like, how did that happen as a phrase?
Oh gosh. I guess, well, easy in that you don't need like a preparation like SAT kind of. But
Right. And I guess it's not hard labor, but
yes.
the degradation of it.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, absolutely. Unless you
Yeah.
are a comic, then it's your profession.
Right.
But
Yeah.
but I guess, is this one of the things that teachers are trying to teach in critical race theory in America?
No,
What are they
I don't think
teaching
so. I
kids?
mean, I don't think this is taught, honestly. It's so wild. Like, I've got a master's degree, and I have an undergrad in political science. I have a graduate degree in political science, and so I've taken a ton of history courses. I can speak 2 languages other than
Mhm,
English. I didn't learn any of this in any of those courses. I feel like education in the United States, by design, now I
mm,
understand it's by design, is
mm.
woefully inadequate.
And when you say by design, tell me more. I'm so intrigued.
They don't want us to know this. They don't want us to know this legacy of how horrible we've been, not only to Americans, but if you look at, and I certainly know this from my political science studies,
Mhm,
if you look at our interference in other sovereign nations in
mhm,
Africa, in South America, in Asia, all over
mhm,
the world. I
mhm.
mean, are we colonizers? Technically, no, but technically, yeah, right? We have colonized this whole world with our capitalism and our commercialist shit, right?
Yeah.
So they don't want us to know that. They
Mm.
just want to present this America.
MAGA forever.
Exactly. MAGA, MAGA. I
MAGA.
love the whole MAGA. I don't love MAGA at all, actually, but the whole like "Make America Great Again," I don't think we were ever great. I just don't. Like, I think we've had times when it's been good, but it's always been good on somebody else's back or somebody else's dime. That's the
Yes.
problem.
Yes. I mean, that's the whole point. Even like when I got to the UK, to be honest with you, I got here with a romantic idea of, the crown. Like, oh, I'm gonna be, you know, basically a few feet away from the throne,
Right.
and so on and so forth. But then, of course, I did the work, as in I listened to more of British history, and told by all of the colorful British people from so many other colonized countries.
Yes.
And they told me, well, through these podcasts and books that I was listening to, all these anecdotes and statistics, and it made me realize, like, damn, I shouldn't be so feeling so inferior to the Brits because they only
No.
got this far because of us. And that's
Yep.
I had never put the two together. And it's crazy. And as you said, the years and years and generations of being colonized, it colonized our mindset too. That's what a lot of people don't
And think
understand.
about exactly. Think about the term that the British, the Queen and the royals would always use, the Commonwealth. Where do you think that wealth came from?
From
The
the
wealth didn't
commoners.
come from England, probably. It came from all of those exactly, it came from all those colonized, then they literally went in and ransacked and took the wealth, and then they left. I mean, God, look at what they did to India. I always British people are trippy for me. I love to go to Britain. I did my honeymoon in the UK. Like I said, I used to work in the UK, or at least for a UK company,
Mm.
and I love the UK. That the
Yeah.
one thing though, it never fails. I go there, I get into an Uber or a taxi, and the person who's driving, first thing they ask me is, "You're an American, do you have guns?" So I'm like, there's
Really?
that conversation. Are you really into guns? Yes. But then the second question is, why are you all so racist? And I never miss a beat. And I'm like, who you think taught us to be racist? Like, come on. Like, yeah.
Wait, wait.
I'm always like, what?
But the driver are a person of
Yeah.
color.
No, no. They're
So
always
they're
white.
white.
They're white and they're always, but we do this thing. Remember, you talked about pecking order, social class. They're
Yes.
holding themselves, white people holding themselves here. You Americans are here, maybe here, right? And I'm like, you're not. You're racist too. Shut up. Come on,
Oh
dude.
my god.
And then they get real quiet. I'm like, okay, sorry. Like, we suck. Don't get me wrong. We suck, but they're the original suck. I'm sorry. Like, no. Let's
Oh
just
my
all own
god.
our suck.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that is how little British people know about their own history.
Of
Or
course. By
I
design,
mean,
though. I think their schools
yes.
probably don't teach it as much as by design.
Yes. I have to say
Right?
though, I have kids in primary school now, and they
Yeah.
they are woke as fuck. And and
Good.
Yeah, exactly. And because well, they're half white and they have a little bit of white guilt as well, which is good. Like but then they're what they're taught is closer to reality that colonizing is not good, basically. So
Good.
they acknowledge that at school these days, which if I didn't have kids at school, I wouldn't know. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a book series called Horrible History, which I think is
Mm,
great. Don't you think?
yeah, absolutely. Which it should just be called history because I think it's all horrible for the most part.
Redundancy.
Right.
Yeah. But do you have
Exactly.
kids, Denise, by the way?
No kids. Nope.
By choice?
By choice and by circumstance. So I was married for over 20 years to my college sweetheart. First
Oh.
time I was married. I met my husband that I had, my second husband, Ned, who I'm married to now, when I was 43. And I absolutely would have had kids with him. He's a 3-time cancer survivor. He went through horrendous radiation, tons of chemo, so he can't have kids.
Mm,
So I mean, yeah, I would have met him. We were just talking about that yesterday. If I would have met him earlier, we'd absolutely have kids, but it didn't happen.
yeah. Well, it's the other way around with us. It just happened. The three kids that we have, it just happened.
I love that. You bam, bam, bam. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's great.
like it just happened. But it happened 3 times. um, but we were betting on my husband not being able to have kids. So it's the other way around. But
It's
yeah,
the other way around. I love it.
yeah, absolutely. Um, what I was going to ask you is that do you have then hope for the next generation to be more aware of their privilege, to be more aware of their, even as a person of color, like me, I'm a woman of color, I'm an immigrant with my visa is running out, by the way. So I have that looming over, but I'm able-bodied. I still have my privilege, right? I'm not
Yeah,
homeless.
yeah.
I still have my privilege. So yeah, do you have hope for the next generation?
I do. And I think the thing that gives me the most hope is the fact that, at least here in the United States, we're going through a massive demographic change. And that
Yeah.
demographic change started several years ago.
Hmm.
And I do think that right now, we white people are kind of slow. So we're like, oh gosh, there's a lot of people of color now in America. And it's like, yeah, they've been here for a while. This is not new. So we just, thanks for waking up, Becky, So my hope is that I just believe that a demographic that is so, multicultural, that is so diverse, is not going to take the same amount of shit that the previous,
Mm,
populace took. That's my hope.
mm,
The problem we have, and the thing that gives me a measured approach to what it's going to be like, is that we still have this white patriarchal system, right? And capitalism specifically
mm,
is very, very good at tucking people into boxes they might not want to be in otherwise, just
mhm,
because that's how we make a living. It's how we feed our families, keep a roof over our head. So I worry. I worry. We've had, I mean, if you think about it, and people don't think about the boomers this way, the
mm,
boomers had so much potential as a generation. They were the folks who, and these are white boomers, were
mm,
marching side by side with some of the folks in, Selma. When I think about, some of those, white young Jewish kids at the time who were
mm,
really into the civil rights movement,
mhm,
there's a lot of greatness in that and a lot of potential. But then look at where we are at today. The people who are MAGA, who are voting for, Donald Trump, are boomers from that same generation. So I just, age tends to make us more conservative. Sometimes it jades you, it changes you. So I'm always kind of measured in my thoughts for the future. But my hope is the diversity alone will hopefully move us in the direction we
yeah.
need to go in. But I want to be clear, without white people self-interrogating, because we're the ones who everything's white centric. This is a white system. Without us leaning in and changing things, I don't think it's going to be what it needs to be.
Mm, exactly. It has to start from within. Like, and I very
Yeah.
often, so now I'm that annoying person that would point out how this is white centric, this is white centric, or Western centric. So the structure of names, for example. So Rebecca Leppard is not my legal name. Leppard is my husband's surname, but Rebecca is actually my last name. In the passport, it's my last name. And so my first name is Fredina. So I just have two names. There's no family name. I'm like the queen. I she had to
Love
make
that.
up her last name, Elizabeth Windsor.
Yeah.
Windsor was not the real name, right?
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, the royals, they don't have last names either. But still, when I go to the pharmacy, when I go to school, people are like, okay, so what's your name? So what's your last name? Listen, it's only because the passport system is always white centric. You force everyone to have first name, last name, and it has to be structured that way. But then, except when it's bibliography, it has to be his first surname first. So everything, it has to be your rule. Like in enough culture, enough people, there's a billion people there that has their first name as their family name, and so on.
Yep.
And there are cultures where we don't have last names, and a lot of people also miss that last naming is actually very patriarchal.
Yep, it is. I mean, look at Spain. I mean, you have Spain where, it is not the traditional patriarchal naming convention, which I quite like. I think it's really rational, right? Like, why do I have to take? In my first marriage, I did hyphenating. So I was Denise Conroy. That was the biggest pain in the ass ever. It was so annoying. People are like, is it Conroy or is it Galley? And then it'd get snotty and it sucked. So then when I got married the second time, one of the first things I said to my husband now, I was like, I am not changing my name. I really like my last name. I've had it my whole life and I just want it, right? Like it's part of my heritage. I want it. And he was like, I knew he was a keeper. He's like, I don't care. Whatever. Just do you,
Yeah, and that's the thing. So so after I got married to my husband, and plus in my place of work, I deal with a lot of white expats, and it was my colonized mindset that said, okay, let's make it easy for the whites, for the Westerners to digest who I am. So I started, so this is my stage name now. And exactly. And even LinkedIn, I had to, so I was locked out of LinkedIn a couple of months ago. And when I tried to log back in, they asked me for my ID, and I gave my passport. Of course, it doesn't say my last name, my stage name. And it came back to me and say, why is your name this? And why is your LinkedIn name this? You have to prove. So I had to attach my marriage certificate. Denise, I tell you.
I'm getting angry. I'm angry.
I know. And exactly these things. And this is what people with privilege would say. Well, what is like 2 seconds extra to explain yourself? Yeah, 2 seconds.
I don't want it.
I know. It's crazy. And it's not even like all of the small things like I have to say my husband still does not understand how anxiety inducing it is to be brown in England, because like if I get out of the shop and it beeps, it stressed the shit out of me.
Yeah, absolutely.
and my kids, I told my kids, always take the receipt. Always take the receipt. And um, even there's a white lady that said to me, but it's a waste of paper. You're not taking care of the planet if you're taking the receipt. And then I said,
Good.
Karen, listen. The amount of paperwork that needs to be done when these people try to book me for stealing, that is a lot more paper that is killing the planet. All right.
Exactly. It's not receipts that have us in the global climate crisis that we're in. It's not receipts. I just want to be clear. It's funny, I'm reading a book about that right now. It's so
Yeah.
good. It's called The Heat Will Kill You. And when you read about that, it's like, it is not receipts. I just want to say that, Karen.
Oh gosh. And okay, I guess the last couple of questions is, how have you then seen the white women privilege in the business space, that you're a founder, that you are Queenmakers? Do you see yourself as a consultant, as a coach? Do you see that happening more clearly? Like, oh, damn. Like, aside from your experience with Chief, like your day-to-day experience at work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that white women do a very poor job of at work, and this is white men as well, but a lot of
Mm,
times white women are sort of the water carriers. We're the henchmen for white men, whether we like it or not.
mm,
Because if you look at the top of the chain in terms of
mm,
power,
mm,
usually it's largely white men, right?
mhm,
So we then are in a lot of different support functions and we
mm,
uphold this white patriarchy. So what I see more than anything is white women, I call this white feminism. They might be very, you go girl on LinkedIn and girl boss and all this shit. But at work, they're very good at scapegoating women of color, especially Black women. They are very, very good at making environments hostile to them. And all of these tactics are strategies for white women to stay in power. So you've heard me with Chief,
mm,
especially, talk
yeah.
about white feminism.
Mm,
White feminism is that it is somebody claiming that they are a feminist, but when you dig, and you don't have to dig very deeply, you will see that they are only a feminist for white women. They're not, what we're going for is intersectional feminism. We
mhm,
are going for, you are a true feminist. And I finally understand this now. And I'm 52 almost, right? It took me a long time to get this.
mm,
But if you're really an intersectional feminist, you're going to start with Black women. Because when you look at how Black women have been treated
mm,
historically, it's
mm.
the worst of the worst. And this is not by the way, it's not the suffering Olympics. We're not going for that.
Yeah, yeah.
But we do
It's not
want
a
to
competition.
recognize, not a competition. That's not something you want to win, right? But you got to start with the folks among us
Mm,
amongst women
mm,
who have it the toughest. And if you look at income disparity status, you
yeah.
look at, social determinants of health, it's Black
Mhm,
women. So
yeah.
if you start there, and I'm really privileged, 60% of my clients are Black women.
Wow.
So I, for some reason, have attracted a lot of, and these women are, I say this all the time, they're highly qualified. They are
Mhm,
probably overqualified for most top leadership jobs because they've had to be, right?
mhm,
And I see that with, most of my clients who are in the global majority, right? Just generally, if you're a woman of color, you've worked your ass off and you have every credential known to man, right? You've done all the things. And it's never your credentials that hold you back. It's usually the environments that you're in. And those environments are tougher because white women are pretty nasty.
wow. And when you say nasty, what do you mean by that?
Unwelcoming, unwilling to be inclusive. I think a lot of us don't even know how. I think
Mm,
that we see everyone as competition, including other white women. And that's a feature.
mm,
Whiteness has features, and nobody talks about this.
mhm,
But just like Blackness has features, I'm sure in your culture there are different
mm,
features. The
mhm.
feature of whiteness is that we're always at each other's throats, striving to be perfect. We never truly connect with each other and do great things together. We just don't, right?
It's
Now
so
you say, how do you
crazy.
how do you fix it's nuts. It's nuts. And
It's
it's what
mean
holds us
girl
back.
vibe.
The system, it is. It is. And the system works really, really well that way.
Mm,
So the first thing you have to do is, as women, we have to stop tearing each other down. And I know you see that on LinkedIn in a very performative way all the
yeah.
time, but we really do have to ask ourselves, why do I want to rip on this woman because of how she's dressed? Or why do I want to rip on this woman because of her haircut? Or you start with the superficial stuff, and then you
Yes.
can start to like whittle away to
Mm.
the really like meaty stuff.
Yeah. And what would you say to, or what do you normally say to your clients, to your women of colored clients, to, and I know it's not our job or their job to explain themselves or to educate the white women, but how would you say to them, like, okay, this is how you manage the situation when you're facing cattiness, mean girl vibe around you?
I think the best way that you can deal with it is to, head on say, "Hey," and again, you do it behind closed doors, because when you embarrass people in public,
Yeah.
then they never forget it. Now, there may come a time when you have to embarrass somebody in public, right? Because it's
Oh
just
yeah.
so egregious, the racism. But you start out with the behind closed doors conversations and say, "Hey, you said this and it really made me feel like this, and here's why,"
Mhm.
right? So you start that way, but I will tell you, there may come a time, and this happens more often than not with women in the global majority, who you might have to leave. And you see that. Like I see a lot of clients, especially women of color, bouncing around to a lot of jobs, not because they're not good at what they do. They're always looking for that place where they can be even a fraction of themselves. They can
Mm,
be authentic. And that's the thing. So many of these white spaces, you can't be yourself. It's not safe, not psychologically or safe in any other way. So you
wow.
have to wear a mask. So there
Mm,
are places,
mhm,
right? But you do a lot of, moving around to figure out, where's that place where you don't want to fit in. You never want to fit in.
mm.
You just want to be able to exist as who you are. That's the goal.
Yes. And so, Denise, when you're king, complete the
When I'm
sentence.
king. Ooh.
Yes.
Well, first there will be a crown that will be amazing. Really heavy and like just really like gaudy and disgusting first. But I think when I'm king, and it's funny, one of the questions you had, when we were prepping is, what did I always want to be as a kid? I always wanted to be the president of the United States. I loved politics and history from a really early age. And I had two parents that were just bohemian and weird enough that they never discouraged me. Nobody ever said, "Hey, you're a girl, you can't be president," right? And I think what I want is, I want an end to bullshit. I
Mm,
want people to just say, "Here's what it is, here's how it is, and let's figure out a way forward," right? Whether it's climate change, whether it's foreign policy. I mean, I'm watching what's happening right now in Niger, and I'm thinking, why the hell would you give us all your resources? Right? We go into these countries, we steal their resources. It's us, it's France, it's whoever. We, right? Western world, very white.
mhm.
We go in and take their resources. And to your point, they've got blackouts, they've got all kinds of things in their own country because they're giving everything to us. I just, come on. And I think I want to hope that if you explain that to most Americans, because
Mhm.
no American would ever, right, stand for that. Like,
Mm,
we're going to do blackouts so we can give our resources away to everybody else, right? We've never been in that position. I just want an end to the bullshit that
mhm.
pervades, and I'd like for us to be honest about the challenges that face us.
Yes, I want a t-shirt that says, "And the bullshit." Put that on a
Then the
t-shirt.
bullshit. Just
And
tell me climate change is horrific. Here's what we're going to have to do to get through it. Because if we don't, your children aren't going to live. Like that, literally, like the book I'm reading now is so powerful. And the only thing I keep thinking as I read it, and this is terrible, is I'm glad I'm the age that I am, because I'm not going to live through this and have to see it, because I think it's going to be terrifying. And I'm glad I never had kids. And I know you have them, and I'm sorry to say that,
yeah.
but we have got to, as a world, collectively get our head out of our asses. And the problem
Mhm.
is, we don't have leaders who are strong enough to do it. We don't.
The thing is, the leaders who are strong enough to do it are being cut off their prime being silenced, being pushed
Yes,
around. And yeah, so only clowns are elected.
it's true. Capitalist clown. Mhm.
Yes, absolutely. And with that
Yep.
cheery note, let me end this conversation because, oh my God, I can talk to you all day and bitch about all this bullshit pale male stale people are trying to put into our brain and pollute our mindset. Thank you so much, Denise, for your time. And I look forward to listening to your sermon all day long on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much.
See you on the next episode. Yeah.